The Undercover Policing Inquiry, Tranche 2, Phase 2, with the second day of evidence of HN109. I'm joined with Belinda Harvey from Police Spies Out of Lives and Eveline Lubbers from the Undercover Research Group. What do you make of what's been said today so far?
I think he's giving away a little bit more than he did yesterday. He seems to be remembering things that weren't necessarily in his statement. So now he's saying that he did speak to undercover officers.
He was very strong about that, actually.
He was very insistent that, in fact, that it was probably talked about on several occasions.
Relationships, that is.
Yeah, that not to have relationships, that they were warned about the danger of having relationships, which is different to what he said in his statement, but he says he wants to expand on what he said in his statement. So it's quite interesting that he, as I say, I think he's being a bit more open than he was yesterday.
Yeah, and it's certainly, I think he's more kind of savvy to the process. One thing which, at the end of the day yesterday, it was kind of revealed that he'd had some hesitation of engaging with Operation Hern, Operation Sparkler Nitrogen, and also the inquiry. And this morning it was a late start because for the first 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes, there was a private discussion taking place between himself and the chair about why he had this reticence to engage with that process. Now, apparently, the chair was fully aware of the reasons and he accepted them. And it seems that this has given a certain degree of confidence to his responses since. I don't know. There was. He stated that that not only were officers told initially at the outset and at the end of their deployments that sexual relations were not acceptable, he referred to them as a felony, which was much stronger language to refer from any of the former undercover officers or the managers so far. He maintains that he never knew of any relationships taking place.
I was going to say.
But he said that in the reports, if there was any mention of anybody getting close to a woman, he would reiterate that there was, it was unacceptable to have any sort of sexual relationships.
Again, that's very different from yesterday, because yesterday we got the impression that he hardly or not read the reports, even though he was signing them off. He said it was...
It's quite different from his written statement as well. In his written statement, he says something about, like, informally it would have been touched on, but it wouldn't have been explicit. Now he's like, oh no, it was just wrong use of words then. He also said that when he was talking about Bob Lambert yesterday, he said no significant relationships. Now he was let off the hook a bit. He essentially suggested by significant he meant sexual, which I don't buy. It's certainly what he said yesterday fits much closer with what Lambert said about, like, keep it casual.
It absolutely does. I mean, I think reading between the lines of what they've all said, I think that is what the situation was. That have relationships, they're good for morale, maybe, or good for intelligence, but whatever you do, don't get involved. Keep it casual.
Which is then contradicting with the fact that Lambert was moving in with you. And that was a very weird moment, because he continues to insist that he didn't know about the relationships and that they didn't keep track of where the officers actually lived. And John Dines had moved in with Helen and Lambert moved in with you. And then we went back to the rent books. And he was asked, like, okay, so the rent books were signed like every week, but that in fact you checked the rent books, but not if the officers really stayed at there. And then he kind of expanded on the rent books, and he remembered, like, very visually how it was designed, the left page, the right page, horizontal line. And you go, like, he can't remember so many other things. And he does remember the layout of the rent books, which is such a minor detail.
I mean, also he's remembered that he remembers something about the raid on the scene.
That's very significant.
Niggling somewhere.
He has a feeling. He said, I have a feeling, I have a memory. He said he wasn't involved. He couldn't remember who his DCI was at the time, whether it was Gray or it was Docker, because it took place in November, and that's when the handover happened between the two DCIs. But he has a feeling that he knew about it. That was the last question, so there hasn't any opportunity for any kind of follow-up to that. Perhaps after the break we'll hear more.
It is such a significant thing to happen, and to have the home of an undercover officer raided.
And a home that he didn't have a rent book for.
Yeah, and certainly the entire squad must have known about it, or must have gossiped about it during the meeting.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so
But this is the
incredible.
first time we've heard anybody admit to it.
Yeah,
There's no other
true.
officer, no other. I mean, Lambert dismissed it. Everybody has dismissed it. This is the first time we've heard from anybody that, oh yes, I think there was something about that.
Yeah.
Which is, it's only a minor thing, but it's significant. And it's all these little things. Once we've had that tacit admission,
Yeah.
And you can pull the string.
yeah. So I mean, who knows?
But it is. It like yesterday for Helen Steele, but to be mentioned all the time, and hear them, utilize about what has happened, which
Absolutely.
must be so awful for you, or weird, or like.
Well, it is what it is. I mean, it's just interesting to try and get to the truth.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. So I was just doing the.
Yeah, it's getting to the truth, and it's almost unfolding like a soap opera, really.
Yeah.
I mean, more
So
and
slowly
more
and so turned.
Absolutely, and little hints of the
All
truth
out,
coming through, and certainly compared to yesterday, it's been much more interesting so far
Yeah,
today.
today it's true.
I mean, he contradicted Eric Docker quite a few times, and it was put to him, all this stuff about him, reiterating, you don't have sexual relations. This is not acceptable. It's morally wrong. We heard the thing about like an individual officer, a single officer being deployed, and it having to be explained to him in much more detail.
Yeah.
And he said, well, obviously a married man would already understand the moral imperative of not cheating on his wife. Which I'm afraid.
Well, that sort of reminds you of Meeting saying at the very start that, or was it Pitchford even, the former chair, like
No, it was Mitting.
if officers are still together with the wives they had back in the day, certainly no affair has taken place, because and it's like.
That's not how it works, mate. That's
That's
not how it
not
works.
how it works. Well, still, yeah, I know we have to.
We should. We're about to go back in. I'll do another video at lunchtime. Thanks for joining. I'll see you all in a bit. Anything you want to add?
No, just that, again, it shows the difference between the women whose statements and oral evidence is exactly spot on and consistent with all the police, which aren't.
Yeah, very much, very
What
much.
can we say? Yeah. Liars.